Today I'll be showing you how to make cute, fashionable scrunchies just like this one. My name is Izzy, and welcome to Quarantine Crafts, where I give you just one more reason to stay inside. I'm gonna be using some scrap fabric for my scrunchies, but you could also use an old t-shirt or any other kind of material that you have lying around the house that you think is appropriate. You also don't have to do this step, but I feel like ironing the material before you even start to sew helps to give it a clean, professional look when you're finished. Using a tape measure and some chalk, I'm marking off how big I want my scrunchie to be before I cut it. So it's 4 inches wide by about 18 inches long, and this is just what I assume your average scrunchie size is. You can definitely make yours bigger or even smaller if that's what you prefer. So I folded it in half, and I'm going to cut both pieces of fabric at once just so that it's quicker, since I'm making a pair out of each fabric and they're gonna be the same size. I'm gonna be showing you 3 different ways to make the same scrunchie, and here is method 1. For this first method, you're gonna start off with a scrunchie. I recommend one that fits comfortably around your wrist and has lots of elasticity. You're then gonna take your first piece of material and roll it on itself so that the right side is facing you or facing outward. Slip your scrunchie around the fabric and then close the ends of the fabric around the scrunchie, making sure that the ends line up together. You're going to go to your sewing machine and start with a back stitch so it's secure, and then stitch all the way along the length of your fabric, ensuring that you keep your scrunchie on the inside of the fabric at all times. Now all of the major stitching that I'm doing in this project will be done on the sewing machine, but in the absence of a sewing machine, then a permanent hand stitch will also be fine. Now you're gonna flip the fabric inside out so that the right side is moved to the outside and then the wrong side is on the inside as it should be. The last thing you're gonna do is to close off your scrunchie with a stitch so that it's one continuous loop. And for that, you're gonna take any one end of the scrunchie and fold it in so that you're not seeing those raw edges. And for the side that still has the raw edges, you're just gonna tuck that inside of the other one. I like when my seam lines up all the way around, so I'm ensuring that both those ends meet at the same line. You definitely don't have to do that, that's just a matter of preference. I don't have the recording of when I did this final stitch, but you're just gonna go back on the sewing machine and create one straight line right in this section, and that should tie everything together. With method 2, I decided to make my scrunchie a bit longer. So instead of 18 inches, this one is 22 inches. And I cut it 8 inches wide because I'm going to be folding it in half. So it's going to be 4 inches by 22 inches. Instead of a scrunchie this time, we're going to be using a length of elastic, but just like the scrunchie, I made sure it fit comfortably around my wrist, leaving just a bit of space, and that ended up being about 8 inches. So I cut up a few more pieces that were 8 inches long because I'm going to be making multiple scrunchies of about the same size. If you're planning to make multiple scrunchies in one go, it really saves you time if you layer your material like what I'm doing here. Once you've cut your material, you're going to fold it so that the right sides are facing each other and both ends are properly lined up. Always start with a back stitch to keep everything secure, and just do one straight stitch all the way down the length of your material. This is what your seam is supposed to look like. Now everything is still on the wrong side, so to fix that, you're gonna attach a safety pin to any one end of your material and use it to thread through the length of your fabric. This is going to eventually push the right side of your fabric out onto the outside, making the wrong side the wrong side. So once your pin has reached the end of your material, you're going to pull it so that it flips your material inside out. To get your elastic on the inside of your material, you're going to put the same safety pin on one end of your elastic and thread it through your material, making sure that you leave one end of your elastic hanging so that it doesn't slip through and you have to start all over. Once you've gotten your elastic all the way through, remove the safety pin and tie 2 knots to make sure that it doesn't become undone. Just like with the last closure, you're going to ensure that one end of your scrunchie is folded and the other end is tucked into that side so that you can't see any raw edges. But unlike the last one, we're going to be doing a hand stitch and it's going to be concealed. So for this one, you will need a hand needle and a thread. Any color is fine because it's not really going to show if you do it properly. You're going to start off by putting the needle through the material on the inside so that the knot doesn't show. Then you're gonna go on one side of the scrunchie and pick up a small amount of fabric and then push the needle through the other side of the scrunchie, taking up a small amount of fabric. The smaller the bit of fabric you take up is the less you're going to be able to see the thread, which is what we want. So you continue doing this all the way until you get back to where you started and you tie it off with a knot. With method 3, you're going to sew the scrunchie the same way you did in the second method. The only difference is how you're going to close it off. For this method, you need to ensure that both your ends of fabric are tucked in and not just one. And you're going to line them up right next to each other and then use a few pins to hold them in place. It may not be absolutely necessary to use pins, but I find that it's very helpful. Somehow when you're making smaller scrunchies with this method, it's a lot more difficult just to keep everything in place under the sewing machine, and I find that pins really do eliminate that struggle. This closure could also be done by hand, and I actually find that it's a lot easier for me when I do it by hand. I have more control and I don't even need to put the pins in, so if you're doing it by hand, then that's one perk for you. On the machine, I put the needle very close to the edge of the material so that it doesn't look chunky or very obvious when the stitch is finished. And I'm really just taking my time to go all the way around and removing the pins as I see necessary. I didn't start off with a back stitch this time. And that's because based on how the fabric curves and the small piece of fabric that was on the machine, if I had gone back even a small amount, then the needle would have come off of the fabric and I didn't want that. So instead of starting with a back stitch, I'm just gonna go over the first part of that stitch when I'm finished. And now that we're done, we have a well-constructed scrunchie with a professional looking seam. The thing I like the most about this project is that you really don't need lots of material or even skill to do it. Like I said, even if you don't have a sewing machine, you could use a permanent hand stitch and receive the same results that I got today. I also like that they're so inexpensive and they're so cute. You could definitely wear this out in public and have persons thinking that you bought it from the store. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. I do hope that you like this project and that you give it a try. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and you will see me next time.